Joining us now is Ann Vandersteel. She's a co-author of the CPS Pipeline, State-Sanctioned Kidnapping. That's exactly what it is. From the book, it says, this is a wake-up call to every American who believes families should be sacred, not state-controlled. Every year, thousands of American families are torn apart by child protective services. Behind the language of safety and welfare lies a dangerous pipeline, a system that profits from the removal of children, often without due process, and destroys families in the process as well. And, of course, also destroys the children. Thank you so much for joining us, Ann. And I'll mention you are a co-author of this book. You're also a co-founder of the American Made Foundation. Tell us just a little bit about that before we get into the CPS aspect of this. I'm sure that's broader than just CPS.
It is. American Made Foundation was basically formulated between myself, Maureen Steele, and Christopher Burns, who is an attorney that works with our foundation. And we look at our government and what is really wrong with it in terms of the fact we aren't running a constitutional republic, and we have been basically overrun by corporatocracy and agency government, which has nothing to do with what the founding fathers had in design or had in mind, or frankly, what God would have been for design. So we decided to pick a lane because our future is dependent on healthy children, and you can't make America great if you don't have families that are great. And so Child Protective Services, like all of these agencies, have nice sounding names, but deliver the exact opposite of what the name would have you believe it's going to do. And so we picked that lane because we see the children as our future. And America can have a very bright future if their children aren't under siege. And I ask you, if I told you we have 500,000 hostages being held in America, in a foreign country right now, would you not expect our military to go there? And the answer, of course, is always going to be yes, go rescue Americans. Well, we have 500,000 children trapped as hostages inside this pipeline, this Child Protective Services pipeline of trafficking children. And we're doing nothing about it except, being gagged by courts. And we need to wake up to the reality that this agency known as Child Protective Services and all of its 50 other agencies by different names and across our country are just as complicit. And it's the taxpayer that's funding it. So I'm welcome this conversation. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for writing this book. And again, it is something that everybody needs to be aware of. We have a tremendous misconception about this, just in the same way that the government is constantly telling us that they need to do one thing or the other to protect the kids. And it's usually not at all about the kids. And usually it's not going to protect the kids. We just had the Kids Online Safety Act, which is really not about protecting kids. It really is about getting a digital ID for everybody and an ID to use the internet. And so there's always this hidden agenda that is there. And this is something that should be even more concerning to everybody as we start to move forward. I'm very concerned about the data centers that are so-called data centers. I call them surveillance centers. And they're going to be able to audit everybody. And we've already seen in many cases CPS unleashed against people because somebody doesn't like the fact that they're homeschooling, or somebody doesn't like the fact they didn't get all their vaccines on the schedule demanded by the medical industrial complex, or there's a conflict about gender gaslighting that happens in our government schools. It takes a village to raise a child, doesn't it? Or maybe it takes a village to steal a child, doesn't it?
Well, starting with Hillary Clinton and the Adoption of Safe Families Act in 1997, right? That really kind of kicked this off and turned children into chattel they can monetize because from that, we really have seen that America has built a child welfare industrial complex where children can be removed from their homes, all under the color of law. You've got families being totally shattered when they don't bring meaningful due process. It's all based on hearsay, and these courts are all closed. Files are sealed, and billions of dollars can flow through a system that basically rewards the separation of the family instead of the preservation. This is what we title state-sanctioned kidnapping. It's just disgusting. And we need to know how the system works, who profits from it, and how parents and children are destroyed by it. Because if you don't comprehend that, how can you fix it? And that's one of the reasons we wrote legislation to fix it. And we believe that Florida will be the first state to pass this kind of revolutionary overhaul in their legislation, which will reduce the intake into the system by 95% so that we can reduce the money coming into Florida to continue to fund that pipeline by 95%. When you don't have a need, you don't need the funds. One thing you probably know about DC is once they've appropriated money for something, you're going to have to spend it. So we're going to spend it somewhere else and make it more meaningful. But what they're doing to the families with CPS is just diabolical.
Yeah, and of course, the way they get around the 10th Amendment is by getting states addicted to the federal fiat currency and
Exactly.
then bribing and blackmailing them to do whatever they wish. And of course, we didn't, you're doing that voluntarily. You want the money. So, you're going to do
Yeah.
whatever we tell you. We're not violating the 10th Amendment type of thing. So let's talk about a little bit about the structure of your book. You talk about the machinery, the players, the incentives, the warning signs. Let's start with the machinery. What does that look like?
Oh, well, the machinery is diabolical. It starts with a knock on the door because somebody reported you. One of the instances that I can talk about real life is the Ramirez family who had their child taken at 9 months old because they'd refused a vitamin K shot.
Mm.
Imagine that. You go in for a well
Yeah.
visit and you decide not to take the vitamin K shot, and the doctor just, who's a mandated reporter, says,
Mm.
well, you know what, it's not a law. There's
Hmm.
no, it's sort of a, hey, we think this is a good idea, but you don't, body autonomy, protect the body. The parent said no. So he reports this to CPS, and it results in knocks on the door with CPS and a clipboard,
Wow.
wanting to come in. As I advise families all the time, never let them in your home. Call
Hmm.
law enforcement to be a witness and make an appointment to go and see them in their office. Don't let them in your home, because it's sort of like giving them that opportunity. You're opting in to their quote jurisdiction when you say, sure, I'm going to allow this agency in my home. And now you've invited them to go around, use their eyes, and they can sort of determine whatever else they think may or may not be safe for the children, and
Hmm.
start writing things down.
Yeah, you
And
go on a
so
fishing expedition.
it's
That's
a
right.
fishing expedition of the highest order. And this is where the government can take total control of your child. They can charge you to comply with conditions to get the child back. And that becomes destabilization in your own home. And then and in the process, they're going to use that same instability against you. So how do you call that prop protection? To me, that's state-sanctioned family destruction.
Hmm. Hmm. As a matter of fact, I've interviewed in the past Dwight Mitchell, who was a victim of that, and that's one of his key things.
Hmm.
Everybody thinks about CPS as being there to save kids who are being physically or sexually abused or something like that. That's a very small percentage of the cases that they take kids away from home for.
Right.
And so your first instinct, as he said, is they knock on the door and it's like, well, I'm not one of those people. I'm not doing
Of
anything
course
to my
not.
kids. Come on in. Yeah, I'll show you. I'm absolutely innocent. And never
Yep.
take that approach. That is the number one thing people need to understand. And if they read a book like yours to understand what the bigger picture is, they won't make that mistake. They won't think that CPS is strictly about going after the violent sexual predators that are out there. It's not about that at
Correct.
all, is it?
Correct. No, it's really not about that at all. It's literally about how the state is allowed to, through the color of law, based on hearsay, take your child and turn that into a profit center.
Mm.
And they completely overlook the fact that there's massive human cost, not only to the parents, first of all,
Hmm.
right? The
Hmm.
parents, imagine when people imagine that CPS is removing a child, they usually picture that somebody's done something very egregious to their child, and that's why the child is being carried away. But frankly, that's not the real story. It's what happens after the child is removed. Parents, they face a massive avalanche of costs, whether it's dependency attorneys, criminal defense attorneys, appellate attorneys. They have to bring in witnesses, the
Mm.
court costs, the psychological lectures, all the stuff they have to go through, in addition to all these classes that they're now being required to take by Child Protective Services, whether they have to go through drug testing or anger management or some kind of domestic violence program. All these things are time. And if parents, even though these services are considered free, honestly, they're really not free, because somebody has to drive there, somebody has to miss work, somebody has to pay for the gas, somebody has to
Hmm.
find childcare for the other children, somebody's got to keep the rent paid while attending all these court dates, and then you got to rebuild the home that the state just totally destroyed. So the financial burden becomes part of the punishments, and parents can face, all kinds of court costs, et cetera, that go into all this. So that system is what breaks the family financially and then accuses the family of being broken. So
Mm.
CPS removal isn't not one cost, it's a complete financial siege. And then you've got to layer in what happens to the child. And that is just diabolical, what ends up happening there.
Yeah, it's horrible. And it's because we don't have due process. And we have this
Correct.
fiction that if the government bureaucracy, whether it's the IRS or whether it's CPS or whether maybe it is the DEA doing civil asset forfeiture, if they can seize your child just like they can seize your car, and they don't have to find you guilty of something, they can do They can even not even charge you to take your car. And so it's almost that bad. Maybe it is that bad or worse with CPS, because we're not talking about property. We're talking about children that are there. And it truly is amazing, because what is the incentive for these organizations? There's a tremendous amount of money there, but where are they getting the money, and what are they using it for?
Sure. So the money is coming directly from the federal government in large part. 81 billion with a B dollars a year is what is pumped into the system out of Health and Human Services under the Social Security Administration, Title 4E and Title 4D funding. Of course, it has state matching funds. And sad to say, but minority children, Blacks and American Indians bring more money, as well as children that have disabilities. If they have some sort of medical event that requires medication, foster parents get paid a lot more money. And the system calls it placement. But to the child, it really feels like an abduction. So, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Even when foster parents, right, are kind, just the removal itself is traumatic, right? In the worst cases, children are placed into homes or facilities where they experience, a lot of times, they experience abuse, neglect, over-medication, trafficking risks, instability, psychological harm. And this is on the heels of these foster parents that are being paid a lot of money, in addition to the different sort of therapists or what have you that the child is seeing. And this is where the system is completely broken, because had that child come out of a house and the child was normal, had no medical conditions, or even if it did, but the reason for the removal was because mom and dad sent little Johnny out into the field to go play in 50-degree weather, and Johnny said, I don't want to wear a coat, and the parents didn't force him to, and the neighbor calls in and makes the report. Johnny was happier at home arguing about whether or not he had to wear a coat or not, and now you've got somebody who's made an anonymous report about Johnny not having a coat on in 50-degree weather, and the child is removed. So,
well, even if the child is just out freely playing, as a matter of fact, there's an organization, Free Range Children, out there, because if you did the kinds of stuff that I did when I was growing up, I would have hours to myself, and I could go do whatever I need. I just need to be back when I heard the bell ringing or a certain particular time, and I could ride my bike for miles. I could play outside with other kids in the woods and all that kind of stuff. Nobody calls CPS, but they would today. It's very rare that you see kids out in the yard doing anything, and I guess it's because people are worried that they're going to get kidnapped from CPS. But you're not going to see your kid on a milk jug that's missing, because everybody's going to know that the government took them, so they don't follow that anymore.
And the part that's so disturbing to me in all of this is the fact that we have a courtroom where Americans, I think they're probably less and less today expecting justice, but we did expect justice at one time, right? And I think that's been exposed. But this dependency court system, it often doesn't even look like what you might imagine. These hearings are rushed, right? When you have a quote, anonymous tip or a mandated reporter or whatever, these hearings get rushed. Parents, when they get the message you're being hauled into CPS court, that's PTSD, right?
Yeah.
That is serious PTSD. Parents may not fully understand the allegations that have been leveled against them. And the evidence rules can even be looser. So hearsay can shape decisions, not facts, not a law officer involved in anything. There's no affidavits. It's just hearsay. So you get these emergency removals that can happen before a full adversarial hearing. Parents, a lot of times, are denied due process. They can't bring exculpatory evidence into play here. And they may, if they can't afford an attorney, they may only meet their court-appointed attorney minutes before they go before the court. So judges may actually have to defer to the agency workers. Now, there we get back to somebody that you and I didn't even choose. So these case plans can be imposed before facts are even fully tested. And parents are often told to just comply first and fight it later. Now, imagine that. You've just had your child removed because somebody made a call that said Johnny was out playing in the field without a coat and it's 50 degrees. And this is what you're being accused. This is neglect. I mean, let's be honest. I think, you and I'd rather be freezing than be removed and put into a position where we potentially could be in a foster home that may be nice, but it's not my parents, so I don't want to be with them, number one. But it could be worse than nice, and we could be getting trafficked or abused or whatever. And those stories come up all too often. It's sad, but they do. So,
Now, you mentioned in there might be an anonymous accusation. Is that you don't have any due process to confront your accuser? Is that correct in many of these cases?
That's correct. That's correct. Oh, no. You don't get that opportunity.
A secret court without being able to confront your accuser. That sounds like a star chamber. That's why we have a lot of the parts of the Bill of Rights is against that very tactic. It's an age-old tactic, isn't it?
That's correct. And these family courts literally are star chambers. You do not have a jury of your peers. You're constitutionally protected. Amendments are completely denied. Your right to a jury trial to be heard is totally shut down. Your ability to talk about any of this, you're gagged. Children, all the documents are sealed. This is such an affront to our constitutionally protected rights, God-given rights. In fact, this is what's so disturbing on so many levels, that when children can be removed because the money pipeline is so great. This is where I think the audience needs to completely understand this aspect of it, because child welfare isn't a moral system, it's an economic system. And they don't want you to know what is going on in the courtroom, because if you did know, and if this was public, then the public would completely comprehend how this totally is an economic system. When you have federal funding streams, state agencies, county systems, contracted providers, foster care agencies, group homes, therapists, on and on and on. And you've got to, layer in all the other things like drug testing that they're going to claim we need to do. Your child's upset, so we're going to medicate them. Maybe we're going to over-medicate them because it's just easier to deal with Johnny in a little stupor. But all these vendors, these parasitic organizations, that when children enter the system, that money starts moving. And if you actually can do something to preserve families, then guess what happens? Fewer money is moving, fewer vendors get paid. And that's the central conflict in the system. And the system may say reunification is the goal, but the financial architecture often rewards removal, services, placement, and prolonged involvement. So we can see clearly what the goal is. And Title IV-E funding and these other federal funding mechanisms are all part of that big discussion.
And of course, we're not going to have enough money to cover Social Security, but they're doing things like this: $81 billion for CPS and their secret star chamber process that's there. It's interesting, and we keep seeing the same things over and over again. The bureaucracies that act on their own, that seize your property without any due process, and you don't have any presumption of innocence, over and over again. That is a cancer that is run through our government at many different levels, at many different issues that we see there. But there's also a global aspect of this that I've seen as well. Years ago, there was an organization, I don't know if they're still out there now, it was parentalrights.org, and they were trying to get a constitutional amendment in that would recognize parental rights, because that's at the heart of this issue in most cases, coming after the family. And of course, the UN has been there for a very long time, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Well, if the child has got rights, they can put that in opposition to parental rights, and they can use that as a wedge to break up the family. And that's really what they're doing with these child protective courts and child protective services and so forth. They're breaking up the family. That's the bigger picture that is there, I think, with the UN, as well as the structure that has happened in terms of changing our constitutional republic and democratic republic into a bureaucracy. But address that a little bit.
Well, I mean, you just brought the UN into it. Need we say more? I mean, that is the most diabolical organization on the planet. And, if we were going to point at the direction in which our country is going, when you layer agency government on top of it, we're basically, along with the surveillance state, the Real ID, now we've got the crypto, Genius and Clarity Acts. I mean, they literally want to control every aspect of our lives. People that own Bitcoin are saying, hooray, you have lost your mind. Did you know Jeffrey Epstein was involved in funding the beginning of Bitcoin? Why would you want anything to do with any of this? You think your Bitcoin is safe, but guess what? We just took $350 billion out of Iran's Bitcoin wallet. And we took it through the FinCEN system here. Treasury just said, no, that's mine. So, this insanity of trying to believe that, we see what the problem is, but we're going to get a different outcome. That is the definition of insanity. We are not a constitutional republic. We don't operate like one. We're supposed to be, but we simply don't act like that. And it's because we have U.S. codes and agencies that have taken over. And so I know that's a whole separate show we could dive into, and I'd be happy to do it with you, because I'm well versed in that. And I'll say it right here. I don't file federal income taxes, and I haven't since 2019, because I know I don't have to anymore. And a lot of Americans have woken up and they've stopped filing too. You don't live in DC, you don't work in DC, you're not a taxpayer. And so I'm not. And I refuse to fund a system that is continuing to do this to children. And, again, these children are our future, and the children today are being poisoned. They're being tracked and traced. The good news is, I think these Gen Zers recognize it, and they are leaving the cell phones at home, and I'm seeing more children outside playing off the screens because they want to be left alone. And I think this messaging is coming forward, but the United Nations has a big part of the reason we're seeing this corporatocracy, because we're kowtowing to the very entity that is funding out of the
Mm-hmm.
central banks in London, that is funding all of this.
Oh,
And
yeah.
this is all a giant design to circle the drain. And we're seeing it happen in real time under this administration. And the fact that our children are still being held hostage in a system that we were supposed to obliterate the Department of Education and from day one, and we just refunded it. It's
Mm-hmm.
2026, 2 years in. I'm sorry, I have a real issue with it. And so it's time to stand on the 10th. It's time to take our country back state by state. And it's time to liberate our children state by state. And Florida is going to take a big position in that because we've written that legislation to do exactly that. And the United Nations can pound sand if we elect.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, when we look at the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, this is something that it's a convention that has been entered into.
Governor Paul Renner into Paul pound sand. This is.
Hang on one second. We lost you. You froze up and then you came back in, Ann.
So have you.
Okay. All right. We're having internet problems, I guess. Let's go back to about what point did we lose that, Lance? Where did it freeze up? Because you came back in a second time. About maybe a minute ago. Okay. Let's back up to, let's see where would be a good point to pick this up with, where we first had some freezing that was happening there. Let's go back to, we're talking about the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. I'll tell you what, I'll make a comment and then you can respond to it. How about that?
Right.
So this UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, this is something that they got every nation on earth, except for the United States, has signed onto this. But through the United States, they're running this through CPS and they're running it through the courts. And so they're doing it in kind of a backdoor way. And if you come after the families, if you come after the parents, that is the basic building block of society. And if you can destroy the family, then you can destroy that society. And that really is what the globalist agenda is, I believe.
100%. 100%. And anytime you enter the UN into an equation, I have to swallow carefully because I want to gag. That organization has done nothing to further global peace. They've done everything to facilitate weaponized human trafficking. I saw it up close and personal with my work on the border with Michael Yon. The International Organization on Migration, the IOM. The United States is the largest funder to the United Nations anywhere by a factor of 17-1. Germany is the next closest. So we outspend Germany 17-1 on funding the United Nations.
Why can't we stop that? Well, we got all these people who are saying, I'm not for the UN, I'm not for globalism, and yet they continue to fund it, just like they continue to fund the Department of Education. It was Reagan was going to strangle that monster in the crib. It was newly created by Jimmy Carter, and he said, well, I'm going to stop this. And instead, they grew it to maturity.
They grew it through maturity, and Linda McMahon is still employed, even though day one I was told by President Trump, and he told the world that she'd be out of a job if she did her job well. Well, she just got another pay raise and more refunding. So, I'm a 10th Amendment person. I stand as a people. I stand firmly in the Constitution on the 10th Amendment, and I'm going to make an example of my state here in this interview because Florida is in the catbird seat, right? We've written some incredible legislation. We just have a hurdle. It's called the governor's race this fall. And the only man that would actually stand with what I'm talking about is Paul Renner. And the reason Florida is such an important state to examine because it does have a large child welfare system. The Regional Department of Children and Families Administration, DCF, contracted community-based care agencies involved, the private providers, the dependency courts, foster, and on and on and on, all engage in this child trafficking and the destruction of parental rights. But our message for Florida is simple. If we reduce unnecessary removals, we reduce trauma and save money. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to define clearly what is an exigent circumstance. So if you can define that, then you can reduce the number of children that really lawfully, not just legally, lawfully can be removed. And every child who does not need to enter foster care represents less court time, less foster placement, less case management, less vendor dependency, shall we say, and then, of course, the less trauma treatment later. And then we reduce the trafficking risk because, again, as I said it earlier, child predators love foster care. So now we are fostering more family stability and definitely more constitutional integrity. I don't think this is a partisan issue. This should be readily accepted by people because CPS doesn't care if you're wealthy or poor, although the poorer you are, the more minority you are,
Hmm.
the more money you represent because you won't fight.
You're more
And so,
vulnerable. Yeah. We've seen this with
exactly,
civil asset forfeiture and the drug war. They'll go to
absolutely.
Chicago, for example, and they'll have a massive forfeiture program where they're stealing people's cars. And guess what? The average price of the car taken is about $1,000, not a real expensive car. But to start the process, you got to put up $900 in order to try to prove that your property is innocent of any connection to any drug activity. So yeah, they
Right.
really do focus on the people who can't defend themselves. What are the warning signs? You mentioned in your book you have a bonus chapter where you give parents the tools they need to recognize the warning signs. Are there warning signs for you as a parent that are personal that you need to be aware of?
Certainly, if you have teachers that are asking personal questions, if you have doctors that are doing more beyond just what a regular well child visit should be, if you have neighbors that you have conflict with that are constantly criticizing you on how you are interacting with your own children, pay attention to these things because
Hmm.
unfortunately, Child Protective Services has given people sort of a license to feel empowered to intervene in your life. And in fact, they weaponize the state in order to do that. And again, removal of a child always has to be the last resort. It shouldn't be the first reflex. The state should not be able to just take your child unless there's clear evidence of immediate danger. As I've said, poverty,
Hmm.
medical, vaccine refusal, homeschooling, religious, whatever it is, that should not be enough to justify a seizure of a child. You've got to have, as a parent, real due process before the family is destroyed. And if you find yourself with somebody knocking on your door asking you questions, don't let them in your house.
Hmm.
Never let them in your house. Get a witness and go to wherever that place of business is for the individual, leveling questions. You cannot be a parent and walk into a courtroom unprepared or underrepresented. It's particularly when you have what's called PTSD. And there's Americans with Disability Act covers PTSD. So you can get an ADA representative to join you as your sort of eyes and ears and sounding board when you're sitting in court. A wonderful woman by the name of Melinda Sherwin out in Arizona has done thousands of these cases. She's been a court watcher for 30 years and an ADA for 30 years. And those two aspects alone is what gives you power to push back against an already rigged system that is looking at you as the guilty.
Hmm.
Our legislation that we've drafted calls for much stronger procedural protections, early access to counsel, better notice of allegations, and of course, a much higher evidentiary standard before the state can interfere with the parent-child bond because we got to stop them from interfering, and we've got to deal with the medical kidnapping issue, which is a big precursor when you walk into a pediatrician's office for whether or not if you're an anti-vaccine parent, you better know that your pediatrician agrees with you because if you
Oh
don't,
yeah.
you could be in conflict right there because that pediatrician most likely is a mandated reporter and they will report that you didn't give Johnny the whatever vaccine.
That's right. If they don't get a certain percentage of their kids vaccinated, then
Right,
they get financial recriminations taken by the insurance companies that can put
right.
them out of practice. So pick your doctor very carefully. Pick your school very carefully. As a matter of fact, do it yourself. And I'm a big
I'm a homeschool
homeschooling.
parent.
Yeah, exactly. And so when we
Yep.
look at this, also remember that Child Protective Services is no more about protecting children than Planned Parenthood is about promoting parenthood.
That's
They're
right.
actually diametrically opposed to these agendas. And you're absolutely right. Know the warning signs. Know when there is somebody who is getting nosy or picking questions. We had a pediatrician when my sons were young, and he got really upset because we were on well water. That was one of his things. And so he gave us a prescription for fluoride tablets, and we took it and said, okay, thanks. Yeah, we'll do that. And we never went back. Of
Right.
course, we didn't fill the prescription either. But it can be something like that. And so there are people like that are out there. And it was the first time I'd come across somebody like that. But there's a lot of them out there, and that
Yeah.
is really a trap. They can be weaponized against you. But again, coming back to the fundamental issue, we have gotten so far away from the due process issues and the rule of law issues and the Bill of Rights. That is what's really scary because that is the core, I think, of what is happening here. You're talking about this secretive trial there with CPS, but we see it manifested in so many different ways in so many different places. That is something that people have to pay attention to. We don't have jury trials anymore. They've figured out a way to bully and to manipulate people into doing plea bargaining. And so we don't have jury trials anymore. And I understand why people look at that because they have also manipulated the process of picking the jurors. So you don't
Of
go out
course.
there and just, just like they pick the voters for the elections, they pick the jurors for the trials. They have figured this out. They've had 250 years to figure out workarounds against the plain language of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, haven't they?
They certainly have. And the part I find so egregious is that instead of looking at this problem, let's go back 250 years ago when somebody had a problem as a farmer
Mm-hmm.
or a blacksmith, the town came in to help. If the blacksmith, fell ill, somebody else came in and shoed the horses or whatever it was,
Mm-hmm.
the farrier. We've lost our way. We now believe the state must come in and solve our problems. We have
Mm-hmm.
been programmed to believe that, in fact, is the case. And, we can go back in time and talk about all the different amendments. I wrote a piece the other day about the 14th. I think that was a horrific amendment. I think everything after the 10th should be scrapped. But that's just my personal opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I can back it up in another conversation. But the point is, we have no longer expect our neighbors to help each other. We expect the state to come in. And so this is what is a big problem in CPS because kinship care should always come before strangers, right? When a
Yes.
child
Yes.
truly cannot remain safely with a parent for whatever reason, the first priority should be grandparents, relatives, close family friends, or trusted community members.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is why our legislation requires the state to identify and support kinship placements before placing children with strangers or institutions. For instance, the little boy whose mother was killed by ICE
Mm-hmm.
a few months ago in Minnesota. His dad died 2 years previously, and she became acquainted with and became into a relationship with another woman.
Mm-hmm.
And they call each other their wives. Well, that woman was killed by ICE and in an ICE altercation, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And the other woman, who is not a parent to the child, no blood relation at all, is trying to stake a claim. Well, we are representing the grandfather who has a relationship with the child, and the child loves the grandfather.
Mm.
We're representing the grandfather in court to gain custody of this little boy, who, by
Mm-hmm.
the way, the now remaining wife is trying to trans this little boy.
Oh.
So,
Oh.
leave it to Minnesota for it to be completely sideways because
Oh
that's where
yeah.
we're in court. But this is what we're up against. So why on earth would the state of Minnesota decide that they should give this little boy to the other woman who's only been in his life for 2 years, the grandfather for 8, and this woman is trying to trans this child? By what right, by what authority they have to do that? Why wouldn't kinship come first? So when the fundamentalness of family first has to be spelled out to the letter of the law, well, I guess we're going to do that, and we did. And
Mm-hmm.
this is very problematic in this entire system. This is again goes right to the degradation of the family.
That's right.
So
Well,
yeah,
and we better get this fixed pretty quickly because they're pigeonholing people based on your political beliefs, your religious beliefs, and things like transing kids or whatever, and they're going to know that about every single one of us. And if we don't get a system of a rule of law and due process, open courts, and having a trial by your peers and that type of thing, our goose is really cooked with all this stuff because
right.
these people have got an agenda, and they're going to be coming after us with religious persecution, political persecution, you name it. Everything is open. And I don't want to see that happening on either side. We ought to have an open and clear system of rule of law and courts, and this is anything but that. And that's one of the key takeaways that people should get from your book, I think, is just to look at what a mess this is. And it's
Yeah.
not the only area of our society where this is happening, but it is particularly horrific because it's happening around children.
That's right. Well, it's happening to children. It's happening to our elderly, our most vulnerable, the elderly and the young. The
Mm-hmm.
guardianship business is just as sick and as insidious as the CPS business, to be honest.
Mm.
We're seeing we deal with cases every day where you have estates that are being completely liquidated by the courts and their parasitic organizations involved in the declaration of a senior being non-compos mentis or unable to take care of themselves,
Mm.
and their estates are raided. Everything is turned over to the state. It's just and the children, the heirs of the estate, are left with nothing.
Wow.
Imagine working your whole lives, you have a beautiful family, and then all of a sudden the court decides that you're not able to take care of your affairs, and so they liquidate your estate and your children get nothing. That's what's going on.
Yeah.
So it's the same family court system we're talking about, the same judges, the same court-appointed attorneys. It's the same law enforcement in a lot of cases that are involved in all this. We've got sheriffs that are taking homes before they even get auctioned off. They're getting first rights to buy and flip these homes or turn
Oh,
them into
wow.
rental properties
Yeah.
because the law enforcement's involved in taking the elderly and putting them into a group home. I mean,
Hmm.
this is insanity. We're destroying our country over money,
Yeah.
over
Oh, yeah.
money,
Yeah. It
and
is.
false accusations.
The love of money is the root of all evil. And of course, that is what's motivating this. There's massive corruption within our government. And it's because we don't stand by the rule of law. Once you
Right.
just give these people power and there's no accountability for anything, that's the key takeaway from all this stuff. And again, the book is The CPS Pipeline, State-Sanctioned Kidnapping. Very important, very important. And tell us a little bit about your American Made Foundation.
Sure, the American Made Foundation is a 501(c)(3). We established ourselves to address the corruption inside our agencies, and we chose Child Protective Services because we know children are the future. And if we don't get this right,
Hmm.
we're just condemning our children to a life of slavery and of trafficking.
And
And
ourselves as well. Yeah, that's
exactly.
right.
Well, I mean, they're treating children like chattel.
Hmm.
We can take this back to the birth certificate. I mean, we have submitted ourselves to opt into their system, and their system is run by agencies and corporate codes and bylaws. It has nothing to do with natural law that God intended for all of us to be free, and our founders recognized that and codified the Word of God into our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence, and previous to that, the Articles of Confederation. And this is what is so critically important that people comprehend that we are having our freedom systematically stolen from us. And
Hmm.
even in this administration right now, we're watching it happen day
Hmm.
by day, and we're being told it's great
That's
and
right.
trust the plan and all this. And I'm sorry, I can see it unfolding, and many people are waking up to it unfolding right now, and they're pushing back. And so, if we don't push back to protect our children, and we're fighting other battles because we're more concerned with our money, then we're no better than the people who are trying to enslave us. We have to protect our children. That is the future.
I absolutely agree. Yes. And again, we're talking about the Christian principles this country was founded on. That's the Christian worldview that men are not to be trusted. And the founders even said that. Let's hear no more about trusting man. Let's bind them down with the chains of the Constitution. But we just look at this and we start cheering for a particular party or an organization or a politician, and we don't care to look at what they do. And we have lost the idea that man is not inherently good, that we all have issues, and there's this temptation that is there, this massive pot of money now that we have the Federal Reserve that can just conjure money out of thin air for as long as that lasts. That's going to be a real awakening when that goes away. But as long as it can just conjure money out of thin air, it can get whatever it wants by bribing people. And
That's
that
right.
massive money that is there has really corrupted this country. It really goes back to the Federal Reserve, I believe, and the fiat currency that's there. But that's another
Completely
story.
agree.
That's another story. Once that thing goes, it's really going to be that Ponzi scheme goes. It's going to be really difficult for us economically, but it'll be a very freeing thing to have real money again somehow or the other. So we'll say you've also got a Substack. Tell us about that, Ann. Where people find that.
Our Substack is populated mostly with Maureen Steele's writings. She's a very, very accomplished writer. She's published regularly in American Thinker, Blaze, and a whole host of other journals that love
Hmm.
what she puts out. She represents the work that we do. If I had her gift of writing, you would never see me on television. But I have more of the gift of gab, and she has the gift of the pen. And so together we are a pretty formidable team because to bring it home, as I've said, children are our future. They are not commodities.
That's right.
And our families aren't for case files. We're not that, right? Parents are not guilty because the state says so. And that applies to just about everything that you can talk about when it comes to the government. And, the government at the end of the day was never meant to be allowed to hide behind the phrase of best interest of the child or whatever, while
Yeah.
they're destroying the very families or businesses or whatever it is um, that needs to be out there in order for the betterment of society. And they are doing a great job of destroying families. And sadly, when you have families that are destroyed, society breaks down.
Hmm.
And when society breaks down, chaos erupts. And then what do people cry out for? Help us, big government, come bring order to the chaos.
That's right.
And this is the perpetual battle that we're in.
It's a cycle.
It's just, we're constantly feeding the beast with it's a cycle.
And
So yeah,
your book does a very good
it's
job of explaining the Kafkaesque aspect of this, because that's really what we're looking at. Something like Kafka's
right.
The Trial. That is the world in
Yeah.
which we live, and we've got to change that. And the longer we wait,
Yeah.
the more difficult it's going to be to do that. Thank you so much for joining us, Ann
Thank you.
Vandersteel. And again, the book is, I had the title here in just a second, CPS Pipeline, the State-Sanctioned Kidnapping. CPS Pipeline. You can find that at Amazon, everywhere books are sold. Thank you so much, Ann. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for what you do. The common man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at davidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. davidknightshow.com.